Hi there, y'all. I'm PaintThatBell, and have you ever wondered how to make some good-looking characters? Well, today I'm going to show you my top 5 tips for creating characters that I have learned throughout the years of making characters myself. Also, I got a new haircut. I don't know who would care or who would notice, but I care. Let's go ahead and jump right into it, shall we? Who is your character? When it comes to this question, it might seem easy, but there's more going on beneath the surface than it seems. You really need to become your character. A lot of people don't talk about this, but every character you make is a part of you. So to really answer this question, you kinda need to get into the mind of your character. Once you've done that, then you need to ask your character questions. Like, what do they like and dislike? What is their backstory? How has their backstory affected them today? What are their relationship with their friends, families, strangers, co-workers, boss? What are their flaws? What do they consider to be good traits? How confident are they? What is their outlook on life? What is their world like? There are tons of questions you could ask and answer, or you could leave it to the basics. It's up to you, but it's always best to get a good idea of who your character is. We have a character here. You might have noticed her. Jane here is an ex-sheriff, now bounty hunter. She used to be a highly trusted sheriff of a king, but when she gave some information to the enemy in a war, she was branded a traitor and exiled to live among them. She's had some run-ins and has some scars, scratches, and lost her arm, as you can probably see. She became a bounty hunter since either side really did this to her, and now she's on her own. She's rough around the edges, more rebellious than others, brutally honest, a little bit callous, but very loyal to those she considers deserves it, has a high sense of justice, brave, creative, and logical, while being very decisive, focused, and clever. She's very adaptable to any climate, having to learn that being a bounty hunter. The world she lives in is war-ridden between humans and monsters, but also very dungeon punk, which is just steampunk with magic. That's why she has a lot of steampunk elements to her design. Putting all of that together helps shape the character and help with the design. So you see what I mean when it comes to knowing your character? It helps a lot when it comes to designing characters. The next tip is keeping it simple. What I mean by this is when it comes to design, you don't want to throw all the things you think is cool onto a character. You need to keep it simple in order to keep it readable. You want to know your shapes, what the point of interests are, and what exactly you're trying to focus on. Your character should consist of shapes. That way, when a character is broken down to, let's say, simple sketches, you should be able to tell it's them, but they're in shape form. If you can't do that, then it might be time to restart your design. Another thing to keep in mind is how much are you putting on your character? What are the points of interest and how many are there? A good rule of thumb is the rule of threes. The rule of threes applies to nearly everything. We're drawn to it, and the same goes for when you design your characters. When it comes to characters, you probably only want 3 points of interest that stand out against everything else. For Jane, that would be her hair, her bandana, and her arm. Those are the 3 points of interest. Don't worry too much if your character is a little over 3 points of interest. Just as long as it doesn't exceed 5, you're all good. Finally, where is your focus? This could be tied a little bit into points of interest, but it's different enough to not consider it lumped there. The focus is where you draw all the attention to at first glance. For Jane, that would be her face. But why, and more importantly, how? Well, for starters, you probably want your main focus of interest to be the face. I mean, faces are expressive and they tell so much about your character. So you should probably stick to faces when it comes to focus. But how do you do that? Well, for starters, composition can help in characters. You can see her that by her stance is more of a triangle that's pointing upwards. The shoulder armor also has a bit of composition to it. It has a nice curve that curves upward towards the face area. Another thing you can do is bring attention to the face is draw the hair to be interesting. It can be an interesting shape or an interesting color. You can tell with Jane here I used bright yellow. People's eyes are drawn to bright colors and warm colors, so keep that in mind when you design characters. The next tip I have is you need to make your character readable. This kind of ties into the last tip, but it's more about being able to tell who your character is from the image alone. This is where you ask all the questions that you did earlier and put it into design. One way to do that is to bring on the shapes. We talked a little about it in the last tip, but now we're really going to talk about it. Shape language is what defines a character, more or less. Squares are for characters who are strong either mentally or physically, characters who are stoic or who are stable. Circles are for more friendly and agreeable characters. A lot of protagonists have circles in their designs. Take, for instance, Mickey Mouse. Finally, we have triangles. Triangles are mostly used for villains as they represent danger, determination, and opportunism. Now that you know what the shape means, you can mix them up to convey who your character is. It doesn't matter what style you use because shape can even be used to convey on how they stand. Take Jane, for instance. Her stance is very triangular, so you can see her determination and opportunism. But she's also very strong and more stoic, as you can see a square in her torso. Her facial area is also a circle, so she isn't totally unagreeable. But as you can see, I use more triangles in her composition as well. She's rough around the edges, she's blunt. So the stance she's taken, the way she's holding the gun, her shoulder armor, her arm, a lot of it is triangles, giving the bounty hunter here a bit of edge. Another thing to take in consideration when it comes to character readability is silhouettes. Silhouettes are where you see more of the shape, but you can also tell other characters apart from your character. People need to know who your character is, so when you totally black them out, people know who they are. Good examples of silhouette is Bugs Bunny. You know who he is by his design because his stance is readable and by his ears. Similarly, you want to make your silhouette readable. One way is with shape and stance, and another is to exaggerate some features. Even if your style is super realistic, you can find some ways to exaggerate a feature or two. Maybe their hair is wild and crazy. That could help, or maybe their clothing has a certain shape to it. Whatever you decide, it's up to you. Just try to make it distinguishable. Hair. Yes, hair. Not enough people talk about hair when it comes to designing characters, when honestly, it's a very important part of character design. When I design characters, it's one of the most important aspects and something I put a lot of time into. Hair has a personality all on its own. It has its own flow, it has its own edge, it has its own way of moving. It tells a lot about character. But not only that, it just adds more to the character. Take, for instance, a character who is super regal. They could have their hair put up elaborately if they're super prissy and maybe a bit snobbish. Or they might wear their hair long and down, either in a long, slick ponytail or letting it flow in the wind. Are they bald? Well, maybe the character just doesn't want to deal with the hair. Or they can't have hair. But there's a certain sleekness and a bit of professionalism to bald. Red hair might indicate that your character is a fiery, determined, sassy character. Blonde might mean they smile a bit more or a bit enthusiastic. Blue signal trust, and so on and so forth. Let's take Jane here for instance and see if her hair doesn't say anything. What I see is a lot of spackiness to her hair. She's got a lot of spunk, is a bit more rebellious, and rough around the edges. Her yellow hair, however, signals that she has enthusiasm that she might try to hide behind her hat. Or that she's nicer than she lets on. See what I mean? Hair gives your characters more personality than you give them credit for. Last tip that I have for y'all today is don't lose sight of your inspiration, but also don't get too attached. What I mean is know where you were inspired from and take inspiration and run with it. Don't lose sight of your original vision. Gather your inspiration, make a mood board, draw your character in different settings, write down their personality. Don't lose sight of what your character is all about. Now, for the don't get too attached part, that's not to say lose sight of your vision. No, what that means is don't get too attached to your original design. I've designed and redesigned some of my characters millions of times before becoming truly attached. Characters are sometimes really hard to design and fully convey what you want to convey about them. So don't get too discouraged when you want to redesign your character again, even though you still kind of like the first one. Keep that first one, but make another design. You never know if you'll like the redesign more or if you'll keep the first one. It never hurts to try. Finally, remember to have fun. If you're not having fun, then maybe it's time to take a break or find something that you actually enjoy. But that being said, this video is coming to an end. Thank you for coming to watch this video. It sure does mean a lot to me. Please subscribe and click the notification bell, or as we like to call it around here, paint that bell, to receive more notifications of when I'll be uploading more tutorials. I mean, why haven't you subscribed already? Not cool, man. Comment down below what more tutorials you want to see in the future, cause I'll probably be doing them. Please share with your friends who you think will help. Attack that like button like it owed you money. Stay artsy, my crazy creatives, and I'll see y'all later.